Kishori Jaya Kishore Kishori Kishore Kishori Jaya Kishore Kishori Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Srila Prabhupada Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Adi Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Vrndavan Yasodhanandana Vrndavan Yamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Ballabha Girivardhari Yasodhanandana Vrndavan Yasodhanandana Vrndavan Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jamuna Tiravana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I
never experienced a Krishna Janmashtami like this. And the number is getting up there. Something like 50 Janmashtamis. They've never experienced anything like this. May we not have to experience it again next year. That would be nice. Let's see. Lots of unknowns these days. So I thought of doing something a little bit different because of the circumstance, and that is, of course, there are probably some people online, but I thought there'd be some stalwarts here, so I thought of speaking on a couple of verses. One is by a not well-known but a very celebrated commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam named Srinath Chakravarti, the spiritual master of Kavi Karnapur, who's probably more well-known than his spiritual master. But Kavi Karnapur was a contemporary of Jiva Goswami, and we don't know so much about Srinath Chakravarti except this verse. That's the very first verse in the introductory section of his Srimad Bhagavatam commentary, a follower of Lord Chaitanya, where he's expressing glorification of Lord Chaitanya and glorification of Krishna and Vrndavan and the gopis and Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Some of you are familiar with this verse. Arajya Bhagavan Vrajesha Tanayas Tadhama Vrndavanam is how it begins. Arajyo Bhagavan Vrajesha Tanayas Tadhama Vrndavanam. Let's just do the first line. Vrajesha Tanayas. Nanda Maharaj is the Isha of Vraja, or Vrajesha. Tanayas means the son of Nanda Maharaj. Arajo Bhagavan Vrajesha Tanayas. We should worship Nanda Maharaj's son, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and Tad Dhama Vrindavanam, and his abode. So we're going to spend some time speaking about his abode, because Krishna doesn't appear without his abode, or his abode comes with Krishna. The whole, everything. Srimad Bhagavatam is one way to describe what Srimad Bhagavatam is a oh, this is that trick microphone stand. Okay, I did it. One way to describe what Srimad Bhagavatam is it's a expansion, elaboration on his realization that was instructed by Narada, and go into trance. Whatever you experience, that becomes the subject matter of this literature that you did not yet compose, which is Srimad Bhagavatam in its fullness. So, apashat purusham purnam, he saw purusham purnam. He saw the Supreme Person in full, purusham purnam, apashat purusham purnam. And our commentators add, it's like saying, oh, a 8 days ago was the full moon. And I saw the full moon, it was really bright and brilliant. You don't say, and oh, by the way, I also saw the effulgence around the full moon, because if you saw the full moon, you saw the effulgence around the full moon. And so it doesn't say that he saw Radha, it just says he saw Purusham Purnam. So Purna means with Radha, and that not only means with Radha, but Purusham Purna means Vrndavan. The cows, cowherd boys, Govardhan Hill, the river Jamuna, peacocks, and the cowherds and the cowherd women and everything he saw. He saw in full. So the Bhagavatam is describing that place, Tad Dhamma Vrindavanam. So when the advent of Krishna includes Krishna's coming to manifest his pastimes, that's what we're celebrating, Krishna Janmashtami, is celebrating his Divyam Janma and his Divyam Karma or Lila, his transcendental pastimes. So these are teachings of Lord Chaitanya. The final line speaks like that. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matam Idam Tatra Daha Naparaha. These are the statements of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for whom we have the highest regard. So Krishna is to be worshipped. Of course, it says that in Bhagavad Gita, and it says that in Srimad Bhagavatam. And the teachings of Lord Chaitanya are none different than the teachings of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is none different than Krishna. So, Arajo Bhagavan Rajesha Tanayas Taddhama Vrindavanam Ramya Kashchit Upasana Vrajavadu Vargena Va Kalpitaha. Vraja Vadhu, the group or the collection of the wives or the gopis, the cowherd girls. Ramya, that's a popular girl's name in India. Ramya, very pleasing. And the upasana, the worship that the gopis perform of Krishna is Ramya. It's the most pleasing, the highest of all forms. And of course, this phrase that we hear so often, the Srimad Bhagavatam Amala Purana, that's Lord Chaitanya's assertion. The followers of Lord Chaitanya similarly assert it, and Srinath Chakravarti Thakur is describing because it's the Amala Purana because it's the same as Krishna, who is Amala, spotless, Vishuddha. And one who comes in contact with Vishuddha, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his form, in his deity form, in the sound form, in his name form, becomes purified, benefited. And we worship the name, we worship the deity, we worship the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a little different Janmashtami celebration. The people online are probably some newer people, but that's okay. Just a little sharing. The worship of deities was in the unfolding of ISKCON was reserved until later. the beginning of the Hare Krishna movement, there was pictures, and then eventually it became the Panchatattva painting that celebrated Panchatattva painting. I had friends who were devotees, and they never were artists, but they were drafted into the art department. And the first project was to reproduce Panchatattva paintings that could be used on altars, because that was the Guru Garanga altar. And then only after some time, then Gaurnatai deities. And once the Gaurnatai deities were there within some reasonably well-established temple, then, of course, side by side with the deity worship in a temple was our Harinam, along with Back to Godhead magazine distribution, and then in course of time, book distribution. Then it became just focused on book distribution, and then it became traveling Sankirtan, along with temple activity, and then coming back and so forth. Just little. So Prabhupada was asked, what about when we're doing our traveling Sankirtan, should we take deities? And Prabhupada's answer was, take your books as your deities. And it was a very interesting way of taking books as our deities on traveling Sankirtan. We would have shipments, after we would exhaust the van, we'd have shipments of books sent to us by air freight, air cargo from LA. We'd pile up the van up to the ceiling and then sleep on top of our deities. Or outside, depending upon the weather. And that was our deity worship. That was how I grew up in Krishna consciousness anyways. Because that is also a form of worship of Srimad Bhagavatam, understanding very clearly that the form of Srimad Bhagavatam is Krishna. And Krishna is revealed in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam by the compiler of Srimad Bhagavatam. And one of the appreciations from reading Krishna's pastimes in Vrndavan is many wonderful understandings. I'd like to share some of them. In Krishna's childhood pastimes, celebrated, of course Krishna remained in Vrndavan, according to our acharyas. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is very specific what lunar day he left, but it was 11 years, 8 months when Akrura came to take him to Mathura. So it's not a long time, but how celebrated are those pastimes out of the 125 years, 11 years, 8 months in Vrndavan? Very, very celebrated pastimes. And why they're so celebrated is because of the super excellence of sweetness, Madhurya feature of Krishna's pastimes. And he came, I've been sharing this with others, but Jiva Goswami explains he came to display his sweetness to his devotees, and to those who weren't devotees, to attract the hearts and the minds to become attracted to that sweetness of Krishna's pastimes. And there are different, with those with whom Krishna associated was the whole range. When just sing the Jai Radha Madhava song, the last line, Jamuna Tira. When in chapter 11 is where the elders of Gokul got together and decided too many disturbances. For the protection of the children, let's move. I mean, it's a big deal to move. but they did it in one day. But all their homes and their paraphernalia and their everything. So when they went to Vrndavan, there's a really nice verse in chapter 11, beginning. Krishna and Balaram were talking really silly, like Mohini and Jasoda were in a cart with Krishna and Balaram, and all the other carts are described, and Jiva Goswami describes the conversation in the cart. What Krishna was asking his mother, what kind of tree is that? What's that tree that has a long beard? That's a banyan tree. And on and on. Why are the trees dancing? And the trees aren't dancing, the cart is bouncing. And then he would poke Balaram and they would laugh and they would roll around in the cart and Mother Jasoda would pick them up, and just behaving like little children will behave, as if they were unaware of things. But when they got to Vrndavan, Krishna and Balaram, they went to Vrndavan because Krishna wanted to go to Vrndavan. They were in Gokul, but one of the forests was Vrndavan, and he really wanted to go. And why he wanted to go was to give his association to his eternal devotees in Vrndavan. And it's not just the cowherd boys. It's all the living entities in Vrndavan were very dear to him. And especially dear was Govardhan Hill, the banks of the river Jamuna, and the Vrndavan forest. And Vrndavan forest means all the living entities and the trees and the creepers and the birds and the everything. They were very dear to him. And when he saw them, he was very happy, as was Balaram. And when they saw him, they were very happy. And they conducted themselves like little children. But he's the omniscient Supreme Personality of Godhead, giving happiness to everyone in various ways. There's a nice description. This is Vrndavan. Krishna appearing on Krishna Janmashtami for the purpose of displaying his very sweet pastimes. We are used to hearing, I'm used to hearing, the three reasons in Chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita why Krishna appears: protect, annihilate, and teach. Those three things. Protect the devotees, annihilate the miscreants, restore Dharma when there's Dharma Shaglani, discrepancy in Dharma within human population, human society, and he restores it. And he has great strength to do that. But an additional purpose that Krishna fulfills is this, displaying his sweet and loving exchanges. And here's Vrajavidu, Ramya Kadachit Vrajavidu, Vrajesha Tanayas. Ramya Kadachit Upasana Vrajavidu Varga Virya Kalpita. So the gopis, a really sublime chapter. I mean, it's a little intimidating, just the title of it, the Song of the Gopis, or the Sanskrit is Yugala Gita. It's like Bhagavad Gita and Uddhava Gita, there's Yugala. So this is the gopis describing Krishna. And their description of Krishna is how his sweetness affects all the living entities in Vraja. The way that the chapter is composed, I spent a fair amount of time discussing this recently, so I'm just sharing. It's composed where there's an introductory and a concluding verse, and otherwise all of them are in pairs. And the first of the pairs is describing Krishna's flute, and then the second is the effect that the sound of Krishna's flute has on all the varieties of Vrndavan. Again, he's in Vrndavan, and his happiness knows no limit from the forest of Vrndavan, Govardhan Hill, and the banks of the river Jamuna. So, the gopis, the song of the gopis comes just after the rasa dance, and they've been with Krishna seemingly like the night of a Brahma, which is a long time, but for them it was a passing moment. And the next day, when Krishna would leave to go with the cowherd boys, their song began. And their hearts are going out to Krishna, and the topic of focus is Krishna's flute, because in Krishna's appearance, just like over here, we have the Das Avatar above the exit doorways. And when you see, you know which one is Krishna, even if you don't have your glasses on like I don't. Krishna's holding his flute, and Balarama is holding his plow. So Krishna appeared in Mathura, but immediately, same night, shifted to Vrndavan, or Braja, to Gokul, then Vrndavan forest. And Balaram is carrying plow for the agriculture, and Krishna is carrying the flute for cow protection, or herding the cows, because that's what Krishna would do, according to the gopis. When Krishna was taking the cows into the forest, he'd play his flute. The flute was to call the cows. It's time to go, and let's gather together. And the description given is the number of cows. Commonly, I'm used to hearing 900,000 cows, 9 lakhs of cows. But according to our acharyas, it's asankhitaha, which is, it's a big number. 1 trillion times 1 trillion times 1 trillion times 1 trillion times 1 trillion is some number. And then beyond that is asankhitaha. So it's a lot of cows. So he was calling the cows with the sound of his flute. And as he was calling the cows with the sound of his flute, it had an effect on the residents of the village. Krishna is announcing, I'm leaving now. So their feelings of separation from Krishna are being stirred by the sound of his flute. And the forest creatures are being informed, we're coming. He's calling the cows, but each case, he's calling the cows and different things happen. The trees and the creepers, they hear the sound of Krishna's flute, and they become ecstatic. Ecstatic to the point where sap is dripping and flowers are abundantly bursting forth in different colors. The forest of Vrndavan in this chapter is described as like a rainbow. And normally, most of us, when we think of forest, it's green, not abundantly colorful. But Krishna is returning, coming back again across the river Jamuna, or near the river Jamuna, from the banks of the river Jamuna. It's gorgeous, abundantly fragrant and colorful, and because of the sound of Krishna's flute. I mean, they're mode of goodness trees that have flowers and fruits abundantly, but when the trees hear the sound of Krishna's flute, they become ecstatic. The leaves stand on end, like hairs on the body of the trees. And he's calling the cows. And off in the distance there's a lake. And there's water creatures, birds. And when they hear the sound of Krishna's flute, they either become stunned and motionless, or they start dancing to hear the sound of Krishna's flute. And the movements of the water, it rises in ecstasy to capture some of the dust that's going to be floating in the air from Krishna's flute. And then suddenly it subsides and becomes very calm. The inanimate objects that are in Shantaras start to manifest symptoms as if they're not just in Shantaras, but their ecstasy is being stimulated by Krishna's presence. The clouds in the sky, they hear the sound of Krishna's flute calling the cows. And the clouds make a resounding sound, not too loud to eclipse the sound of Krishna's flute, but to accompany the rumbling like a percussion section, accompanying Krishna's flute playing. And the clouds come over Krishna's head to shade him from the sun. They want to do some service. The rocks melt. The inanimate objects in Shantaras also become stimulated in ecstasy. The peacocks go dancing wildly. And the animals that are on the sides of hills, they become stunned, seeing the peacocks dancing, hearing the sound of Krishna's flute. And the gopis are just describing like this, and on, and how the cowherd boys conduct themselves as if they're there. And the acharyas explain their love for Krishna is so intense, although they're physically remote, and they're having feelings of separation because of that remoteness. In their hearts, they can see these pastimes as they're taking place, like mystic yogis, or like Sanjaya seeing what's going on in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, although he wasn't on the battlefield, and describing their narration as it was unfolding. The gopis have, by dint of their love for Krishna, they don't have any envy of all these creatures. They're feeling themselves how unfortunate we're in separation from Krishna, and they're with Krishna all day long, and this way and that way, and Krishna placing his arm on the shoulder of one of the cowherd boys. And why are we not so fortunate as they are? And then they have conversation with Mother Jasoda and honoring the love of Mother Jasoda. It's not just Radharani, it's just the gopis. And they conceal their particular kind of affection for Krishna, but they're pacifying the heart of Mother Jasoda as she's feeling anxious. He's late. But then they describe why he's late. He's by the banks of the river Jamuna, Jamuna Tira. And he took the cows there to get some water, and then they took their bath playing in the water, and now they're just becoming dry by the side of the river Jamuna. He's getting the auspiciousness of the river Jamuna. So Mother Jasoda, don't be worried, don't be anxious. He'll come home soon. And on his way back, the demigods were hovering in the sky simply to witness in amazement Krishna's wonderful pastimes. Just before Krishna returned back to the village, they came along the path and offering their respects and worship of Krishna, and he couldn't be rude. So he's a little delayed. It's auspicious for your son. He's getting the benefit of being worshipped by the demigods. So please be patient. He'll be back very soon. And on and on and on, describing what it's like in Vrndavan from their perspective. And from Shukadeva Goswami's perspective, who is describing this, naturally he feels the same as Lord Chaitanya feels. The love of the residents of Vrndavan is superlative, and amongst them, Ramya, Kashchit, Upasana Brajavidu, Varga, or Vargena. It's the most pleasing. It's the super excellent form. But while the gopis are super excellent, who isn't? Mother Jasoda, there's chapters of detailed descriptions of the super excellence of the love of Mother Jasoda and Nanda. Comparing, who can compare to the love of Mother Jasoda and Nanda for Krishna? Who can compare to the good fortune of Mother Jasoda and Nanda? There's a whole long section in chapter 8 of Canto 10 describing the exchanges between Mother Jasoda and Krishna, followed by chapter 9, which is the Damodar Leela, how much love Mother Jasoda has for Krishna, how much love Krishna has for Mother Jasoda and Nanda. The description is, Shukadeva Goswami says that Mother Jasoda and Nanda Maharaj are so fortunate that although Vasudeva and Devaki were mother and father, they never had the opportunity to engage in the childhood pastimes of Krishna in Braja. And Maharaj, he's ecstatic. He's like dancing. He's trembling in ecstasy, just describing their good fortune. So, and the cowherd boys, you take any one of the rasas, super excellent is the gopis in their love for Krishna. It's not to say that others are not perfect outside of Vrndavan or amongst those residents of Vrndavan, that they're not perfect. Oh, Mother Jasoda's nice, but that's not the message. Just the degree of selflessness of the gopis, the intensity of the love of the gopis, even when you can compare the intensity of the love of the cowherd boys, and the intensity of the love of Mother Jasoda and Nanda Maharaj, it's compelling. It's certainly otherworldly and supramost. There's one verse that I've been reading the commentaries of our acharyas to go along with all of this, these pastimes. And there's one that's about the cowherd boys that I'm just going to recite, because I probably heard it about 30 times in the last 2 weeks. It's kind of, I have a liking for the verse. You recognize the verse, those of you that have heard Prabhupada speak about Vrndavan. Krita Punya Punja is how it ends. It's describing the good fortune, the amazing good fortune of the cowherd boys. Sukadeva Goswami has enormous appreciation from Nanda and Jasoda and the gopis, but even the cowherd boys, not even the cowherd boys, as well as the cowherd boys. So the verse comes after describing, it's the lead up to the Aghasura demon being killed, and following that, Brahma stealing the calves and cowherd boys, and then the Brahma Vimohan Leela chapter. but it's before they enter the Aghasura demon's mouth. They're taking the calves into the forest and doing what they would do. The description by Shukadeva is their conduct. It's just playfulness. Like little boys, just like little boys. But transcendental little boys. Little boys are like them, not the other way. So the verse goes, Itam satam brahma sukhanubrutya dasyam katanam paradaivatena maya shatanam naradarakena sakam vajro krita punya punja. The cowherd boys all day long would play with Krishna. The same Krishna who is the object of realization of the Gyanis in their aspiration to achieve Brahmasukh, the happiness of Brahman realization. The same Krishna who is worshipped as Bhagavan by those who are in Dasya Bhav or Dasya Bhakti. And to the materialists, Maya Shratena, those who have taken shelter of Maya, when they see Krishna, they just see an ordinary person, an ordinary boy. Those three categories, the materialists, the Vaishnavas, and the impersonalists, they have no access to what the cowherd boys are experiencing. The cowherd boys are experiencing simply playfulness, day and night. Well, morning and night, morning and all day. The gopis have their turn in the evening. Their Krita Punya Punja, Sukadeva Goswami's ecstasy is an expression saying, what volume of pious activities have they performed? The eligibility that they have is not available to Brahman-realized Gyanis, nor to those who engage in Dasya Bhakti. We're engaged in sadhana bhakti. And we're not eligible for what the cowherd boys are eligible for, unless one gets the association of such personalities. And the method of Srimad Bhagavatam for us to get that association starts with hearing these nice descriptions, especially from those who have that mood of this very special kind of love of the resident of Vrndavan. We get the association. One of the ways to get the association of such qualified persons is through the sound vibration coming from such qualified persons. That's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's method. And it's the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they're also giving that very same method through their narrations and through their lives and through their example. So I don't know if any of us in the room, when we signed up to become Hare Krishna devotees, that we knew what was on the other end of the road. And, a little bit of the ordeal that it takes to get there. But the message of Krishna Janmashtami that because of the pandemic, circumstances have been what they have been. And so it kind of started right here from Chicago, because the Srimad Bhagavatam reading got up to chapter, whatever it was, 26, Subal, something like that. So I just continued. And, now up to chapter 36. And then in the evening time, the earlier chapters of. So it's been, thanks to Mr. COVID, it's been a really nice time of immersion in Krishna's pastimes, and it makes Krishna Janmashtami a whole other experience. Receiving the form of Krishna in the manner of his transcendental appearance in the prison house of Kamsa, but it didn't last too long. He went right away to Vrndavan and performed his wonderful pastimes for our upliftment. That's the purpose of Krishna's appearance. In addition to those three, the sweet pastimes of Krishna, to attract the hearts and the minds of us conditioned souls, and to stimulate the ecstasy, to nourish the ecstasy of the eternal associates of Krishna, who otherwise it's Aprakat Leela, and now it's Prakat Leela time. So he makes his appearance and performs his pastimes with them. And jubilation, it's a festival all day long. Simply moving from one ecstatic exchange to the next ecstatic exchange. And incidental is killing of the demons. It's there. Vinashaya chaduskritam. It's incidental. In his Braja Leela, it's incidental. Secondary. And the primary is his loving exchanges. Moving from one loving exchange to the next, the sweetness of Krishna's pastimes. And by that sweetness, he's protecting the residents of Vrndavan from even perceiving material tribulation. That's a verse spoken by Shukadeva Goswami. Even after tribulation, and they're considering, oh, Krishna had to deal with Bakasura. How can we protect Krishna from having to deal with demons? And as they're singing songs of Krishna, because it's not just the gopis would sing, all day long the cowherd boys would sing, compose songs and sing and play. And then they come back to the village and tell the elders, and they would compose their own songs and sing and sing and sing and sing and dance. And they didn't need songbooks. We do. But because they're spontaneous in their love. And that's what we're being invited into. Starting with the appearance of Krishna in about 40 minutes. So we have a little bit of time for discussion if somebody would like to raise some question or have some discussion on a topic.
Sure. When you're saying it, apashyat purusham purnam, and you say that purusham purnam means along with Srimati Radharani. And of course we do understand, because when Narad Muni asked,
Yes, go ahead.
Narad Muni asked Vyasadeva to meditate, and so he saw the internal energy and the external energy on the back of Krishna. So at this point we understand it should be Radharani, but is there any specific reference from any acharyas where they're specifically pointing it was Srimati Radharani?
Yes. Jiva Goswami. But it's not just Radharani. The effulgence of the moon, he specifically says, the effulgence of the moon, the full moon is seen along with the moon. It's not explicitly stated, oh, and I saw, this is his commentary, I saw also the effulgence along with the full moon, but it's implied. So Radharani is implied, not explicitly expressed, Radharani by name. Okay? He usually has more difficult questions than that one. I think you have to speak into the microphone so others can
Hare
hear.
Krishna Maharaj. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
Can I ask a question that is not related to your class? But it's related to Janmashtami.
Okay, Janmashtami, go ahead.
Maharaj, why is it called Janmashtami? Like, why is this word Janma there when we know Krishna is not born?
Because it's Divya Janma, right? Janma Karma Chame. It's a pastime. That's why. Is that all right?
Yeah, but...
Yes, but.
Little follow-up. So why is it not called Janma for other incarnations of Krishna?
Oh, you can call it that instead. It's just become a tradition, Janmashtami. There may be some, more profound reason than it's just tradition, but it worked for me. Janmashtami. His Leela, from our perspective, whatever he does is transcendental. Call it whatever you're comfortable with. It's transcendental. That's the main thing.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Okay, well, we're done early. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna devotees. There are more devotees than we expected to be in the temple right now. So my request is that I have a list of devotees who don't have